too many people in the world right now invest in things they know nothing about because of the fear of investing fully in themselves and knowing what their purpose is because they're afraid, what if I don't get there? You will make mistakes. There will be things along the way, but it will be the teacher.
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to one belief that you have the power within to create everything you seek. So if you are ready to step into a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with me. I'm your host, Rudi, and this is the Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. Today's guest is Garrett Gunderson. He is a New York Times and a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. He is a financial expert, entrepreneur, and a prolific keynote speaker. I had the privilege of listening to this man rock a stage, and it was mesmerizing. His career is challenging the conventional rules that most people follow around money. What I love about Garrett's work is that he doesn't just talk about making more money. He talks about how do you keep more of the money you already make, using money with intention and building systems that protect you, your family, and creating a life that you don't have to escape from. Garrett is not a tax guy. He is a wealth philosophy guy. Taxes are just one of the ways that we leak money, but his broader message is about how successful people can keep more, direct more, protect more, and use wealth as a tool for freedom, family, and legacy. I believe that when you know better, you can do better. And today's conversation is about how can you do better with the money you already have. Garrett, brother, thank you so much for joining me on the Empowered Life Podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to have you here.
It was great. I got to hear you speak at that event as well. And then we did a bunch of roundtables. And it's funny because when the person that hosting it, Carrie's like, oh, you got to know Rudi. And you just had like a big coat on and a whole bunch of sunscreen and tucked away. And then when you open your mouth and start talking, it's like, this is a special guy. I'm definitely going to get to know him for sure.
It was an amazing opportunity just to get to meet you and to spend some time just in proximity with you and these incredible human beings. And a shout out to the Happy Hustle guy himself, Kerry Jack, just incredible human being.
Love that guy.
Super, super, super grateful for him and for our connection. Garrett, I met you, and a lot of people tell me I need to meet a lot of people. And so I don't really pay much attention to when someone says, oh, you've really got to know someone. I'm like, okay, yep, thank you. But the minute you started to talk, and we were actually just having a conversation together, and it was immediate. I was like, oh, I need to pay attention. You have a level of authority about you as you walk into a room. You command the respect of the room, and I'm referring to this energetically. And that only comes when somebody has traversed life and has really experienced all the different aspects that life really has to offer. And that at the end of it, you kind of realize you're not trying to pretend. You don't have to be anything for anyone. You just get to be yourself. And there are a few people that I've met that carry that naturally into a space. And when you walked in, I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot I can learn from this man. And obviously learning a lot about you and your life experience. I'm going to give a quick shout out to your books. You have some unbelievable books. We're going to link every single one of them. This is the Money Unmasked book that I was gifted by you at the event. We're going to talk a little bit about this today and learning a little bit about your life and your life experience and coming from poverty, fourth generation mining family in Utah in a rural town. And then you built tremendous wealth, and then you lost wealth, and then you've rebuilt it. And now you are able to turn around and teach it and share it. And that is really what the empowered life is all about, is understanding that our life is about what we do with these experiences. And you do that so naturally and so organically. I want to ask you a question that comes up every single time I meet a high performing individual. Most people that come to me are looking for a deeper meaning in life. They're trying to achieve what you naturally bring into the room. So my opening question to you really is, through your life experience, why do you think it is that we are all chasing money, and that when people achieve that level of wealth that they thought would make them happy, why are they still unhappy?
So I think that we're chasing that we don't love ourselves enough. So we're like, do you like me now? If I have this money, how about now? I think underneath all of it is like, we're really looking for love and we confuse love and money because everything in society that's materialistic shows it like if you have money, you have love. social status, all this kind of stuff. And look, when you have a lot of money, you get respect. You definitely can get respect, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you get love. A lot of times people actually get jealousy, right? They think that, oh, let me show people how great I am, not thinking about how they could serve someone else, almost like it was a trauma response at some point where they felt unworthy, inadequate, unlovable, whatever it is. They thought that money could fix that somehow. And like I think back to my 20s, and I feel really shallow when I talk about like I was in university and I did this exercise in some class where you draw like a timeline of your life. I wish I could find it because it was just showing the like external things of life. One day I'll own a helicopter, one day I'll own a plane, one day I'll own a mansion. It was just like as an 18-year-old thinking that's what life was about. And by the time I was like 25, I'd bought my parents a 10,000 square foot house and I had a Bentley and I had an airplane that, by the way, crashed. And so I had all these things. And my wife's like, yeah, I didn't know if I made the right decision at that time of life. She's like, you really weren't the person that you are today. So, like, I had these things, and the person that I love most was questioning whether I was the right man for her because I was so caught up in those trappings.
So you just spoke into what I had intuitively picked up when we met the very first time. And I'm going to come back to that confidence that you carry in the room. You're not trying to impress upon anybody, you're just being who you are. And that when we achieve that, we naturally gravitate people towards us. And I want the audience to hear that because for so many of us, we walk into a room and we're needy. We want respect. We want people to like us. We want to be invited to the seat at the table. And we get to build our own table. And your energy is that you have your own table and you're pulling chairs up to the table and people who are aligned with you can join you. You spoke about being 25 years old and your wife questioning, okay, well, we have all of these things, but I don't know if he's the one. What was that journey of creating that change for you of going from having all of that wealth to the man that you are today? And so bring our audience with us on that journey. Who are you today and what's the real difference between who you were and who you are now?
Well, thankfully, I became less of an asshole because I did the work. I was just willing to. When I was really young, I had a financial guy that says, you got to do landmark education. So I went, I did it, and like I didn't get much out of it. And then I was talking to this woman who I highly respected because she worked with some financial people that had written books. And I was like enamored by her. And so she's like, hey, you should do landmark. I'm like, I did. She goes, how? Well, tell me about it. I'm like, it was okay. She goes, oh, you just didn't participate. You went and pretended everything was okay rather than played full out. And that's why you didn't get anything. That's a you issue. I'm like, so you should take the advanced course. So I take the advanced course and I decide I'm raising my hand every time they ask for someone to raise their hand, whether I know what I'm about to say, just to participate. And they do this. So I raise my hand for this thing where they're like, we're going to figure out what your act is. What's the mask that you put on? So I go up on the stage and my mask came from when I was a kindergartner and I didn't memorize my address to get back an art project. So my teacher threw it away. And in that moment, I said, I am stupid. That's what I told myself as a kid. So I was like, if I can make enough money, I can prove I'm not stupid. If I can sound smart, I can prove I'm not stupid. But I'm going to never really be myself because I'm going to be guarded and protected with everything I say to make sure it sounds right. So I would use vocabulary that made me sound smarter than I was and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm up on that stage for 30 minutes in utter pain trying to figure out what this block is where the whole crowd can see it. But then I have a breakthrough. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to start participating in life and be a lot more honest. And so I did the work and I was like, what would it take to be an extraordinary husband instead of an ordinary husband? What would that look like? I was like, well, I'd probably have a vision as a husband. So I want to be a premier romantic. So I started to create a vision because everybody in business has values and taglines and vision and meetings. I'm like, what if I just started doing this in my marriage? What if I just started to show my wife? And the reason, Rudy, I didn't show her this before is because she knew me better than anyone else. And if she didn't love me, it was better for me not to give the full version of myself so I could have an excuse of not being lovable. Well, I didn't really give my best. And when I decided to give my full heart to her and just say, I'm going to be all in and just show her everything. And when she was just like, I love you, I was like, all of a sudden, all of that abandonment that I had, maybe from growing up and whatever those issues were, just started to heal. And now it's to a point where playing pretend is the one thing that I don't know how to do anymore. Like I just have relationships that they're not strong anymore because they want to play pretend and I want to have a real conversation. But also, Rudy, I have high school friends, friends that I played little league baseball with that we have deep and meaningful conversations now that 10 years ago we just talked about what everybody was up from high school. So it's like that's the game I want to play. And thanks to my wife being a mirror and patient and working with me, and also just that I was willing to be vulnerable. And part of it was it's nice when you go from $8 million in net worth at age 28 to zero at age 29, you start to get a little bit more humble, which is kind of the key to learning. Because before I was judgmental, like, why am I not further ahead than this person? And I was just in my head thinking I was so special, which meant I didn't even tell my wife. I fell in love with her when I was 19 years old and she was 18. She didn't even know that till years into our marriage because I wouldn't be vulnerable enough to give that to her. And now we laugh and joke about it. And then even last night I was telling her, I was like, you were writing me letters when we were friends. You knew you loved me. She's like, no, I didn't look at you that way. I'm like, all right. I did. Like, it's just fun to go back. But, and even when I met you, you're like, do I really like your energy? I'm like, man, I feel like my energy's off today. You're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I just feel like I'm in my head about this thing. And you're like, you know what you could do? You could do this thing right here with your fingers, and you can go back to this time where you had something that was really special. And we went to this moment that was magical in my life. And I was like, see, if I would have just been my old 20-year-old self, I would have never said that to you. I would have been like, Rudi likes me. This is amazing. Let me tell him how great I am. Let me continue to prove how great I am, which would have been a turnoff to you. And you'd have been like, yeah, I really don't need to know this guy because it's just about him.
I think that so many people are just going to resonate with what you just shared. Because even in sharing the vulnerability, you had to be vulnerable to share the vulnerability. I was on a call with a extremely high net worth individual last week, and I offer these breakthrough calls, and this individual was on a call with me, and it took forever to really break down these barriers. And at the end of this barrier where he was resisting the moment of truth, he burst into tears and said, "If I share all of me, I will be too much." And that was the unconscious belief that he carried into every room. That was what supported him in building the wealth, was protecting all these walls because he believed he would be too much. And I just want people to hear what you so beautifully demonstrated, because I started today's episode, this wasn't planned, just speaking into my experience of walking into a room and you just know who you are. And that's a really magnetic quality. And I admired the quality in you. And I was like, man, I could really learn something from somebody who knows who they are. He's not trying to pretend, he just is. And it didn't come through wealth, even though you are exceptionally wealthy. It didn't come through success, although you are profoundly successful. It comes from an inner knowing of who you are. And I was like, wow, that is just a beautiful quality. And I admire the quality in you the same way I could look at Tom Brady as the greatest quarterback in the history of the game, arguably, and say, wow, I admire the quality of who he is that got him there. But what you just shared was that at one point in time, you weren't that way. And you had to make a conscious choice to be able to make that shift. Now, I want to throw a fishing line out there for our audience because we're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about how you can save more of the money that you make. We're going to talk about legacy wealth in a moment. But I do want to just stay where we are for one moment because there are people sitting on the end of their seats thinking, I want that magnetic quality. I want to walk into the conference room at work and I want people to gravitate towards me. I want to be promoted. I want to be the leader people want to follow. And so you've got this quality. You also gave us the roadmap of how to get it. And that was by making the decision to start showing all of you. What would you
Yeah.
say to somebody listening to this right now that understands what you've just said, but they kind of need a little bit more of that push because you made it sound so simple? Well, I just decided I was going to show all of myself to my wife. I just decided I was going to have real conversations with my friends. What would you say to the person that's sitting there thinking, well, that sounds great, but I could never really show people the real me because they may not like me?
So, first, let me create three categories for people to consider. One category would be your buddies. Buddies, I wouldn't necessarily show exactly everything I am with a buddy until they're ready, right? Like they just might be people that are acquaintances and maybe they just play life a little bit different. And yeah, I might not push exactly who I am onto them because it wouldn't make sense, but maybe that could cultivate over time. It's just that I'm not going to share my biggest vision of who I am with them first, right? That's not the high priority. There's people that I'm going to be friendly with. People I'm friendly with are the people I don't argue with, but I don't share the same value set. So I love them from a distance. So when they invite me to something, I say, well, that's so nice you thought of me. I'm not going to be able to make it, but thank you. And I don't pretend. Like one time the guy that dated my wife just before we got married, my wife and I got married, the last person she dated, I saw him on an airplane. So I went up and talked to him. He's like, "Hey, we should do lunch." I was like, "Hey, man, that's never going to happen, but I appreciate the sentiment." Like, I just don't lie to them. A lot of people like say, "Yeah, we should do that." And then you have this energy leak where you've told what seems like a white lie to be nice, but then what happens is we don't honor ourselves. The people that you look at are your friends. So that's the category I really want to focus on. Who are the people that show up as unconditional with their love? Like, I had a neighbor when I was a little kid. Her name is Anna Mae, just smoked like a chain, but she just adored me. And I felt it from the time I was just so little. Just go play with my trucks. And I could do no wrong, but she just was like always poured into me. So I always felt like I could tell her anything, even as a 5 year old, a 6 year old, right? I feel like she just would love on me. And then my spiritual mentors, I feel like I could tell them anything, and I do. And they're just like, they pour love into it. I could tell my wife that now, right? That wasn't always the case. I had to say, like, wait, what if she doesn't accept this? What if, and I've owned everything I could possibly think of in my life with her that was a mistake, a thing that I said that was stupid or hurtful or whatever it might be. And the one technique I would say on that, by the way, is I tell my wife, we use this maybe once a year, once every other year, a do over, which is if I come in and she says something and I react in a way that I'm not proud of, I just go, "Hey, babe, can we have a do over?" Sometimes I'll literally leave the house, walk back in. I'm like, "Yeah, we'll do over here." And she does the same thing. She might say something that I'm like immediately defensive. She's like, "Whoa, whoa, let's just do a do over." And we just let it go. But find that one person that you could exercise this with. This happens with money, Rudy. I like to be this guy for people because people have money stories. And the first story they tell is the lie. It's what they want people to believe. It's like a protective measure. Hey, I don't need this. I don't care about that. But if they had the money, they would buy it. They just are kind of like, it's amazing. I don't know your net worth. You don't know my net worth. And we never need to know each other's net worth, but people still judge themselves based upon this imaginary number. And
Mhm.
so, based upon that judgment of what they think they have or don't have, and when they compare themselves to someone in an idealistic life, they usually project that first layer of like, well, I don't need a nice car. It's like, well, yeah, but would you want one if you had the money? I don't care what someone drives. It doesn't matter to me. You don't even know what you drive. You don't know what I drive. I don't know anything about your house. Yet there's all these stories that people tell. The second layer is what people say to themselves, but they never speak out loud. That's what traps them. And that's what hurts people because they're going, "Oh, I'm not good enough and can't believe I made this mistake." And they feel all this guilt, shame, and embarrassment. If they can find one human being they can say it out loud to, it loses its grip and it gets to that third layer, which is what they can't share because it's been hidden from them because they're so stuck in their head. And so what I find is it just takes practicing with one person you trust. I mean, it's one person. I know I immediately trusted you. So I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to share this vulnerable thing." And what I got was a gift that I've used ever since. That if I wouldn't have said anything, I wouldn't have got that gift. But I could just tell how you showed up, who you are, how you're introduced by someone I trust, like Carrie. It's like, yeah, there's so many people. And there was an article that my friend Jason Guinard was reading at an event. He said 70% of people in North America feel they don't have one person that has their back. These are people that are married, all this kind of stuff. So imagine the pain they're carrying around not being able to speak this. I feel like part of the reason I'm so deeply in love with my wife and that she's deeply in love with me is the imperfections, the quirks, the things that only we know about each other. And that is actually so much fun to kind of have that. And yet so many of us hide from the things that we think. I mean, you know how embarrassing? I've lost money in an NFT. I'm a financial guy. I lost money in something in my life. That's dumb. Don't do that. But I was like, well, my son will get to meet a famous DJ and we'll write a song. And then when it went bad, she's like, that was a really expensive lesson, right? I'm like, yeah, yeah, I should know better. But you know what? At the same time, it lets people open up to me because I've also made some really good financial decisions too. But we all have our moments, right?
I want to touch on something. And before I even do that, I just want to just ground for a second. I told you this was going to be a zinger of an episode, and it already is. If we ended it right there, just those 3 points is just enough to create profound shift or change in somebody's life. I want to add to that I work with mostly high net worth leaders of businesses, and almost every single one of them pay an exorbitant amount of money to be in groups with other like-minded men or business leaders or women business leaders or men and women in business leading formats like the YPO as an example, where they can
Yeah.
just have vulnerable conversations because they don't have anyone, quote unquote, that has their back. And you think about that, the higher you go, the smaller your circle becomes. But if you start building your circle, it never has to get small no matter where you go, and you're going to go up. And that's the whole point. But I want to bring this back for a second because you dropped a bomb a minute ago and you said you were worth eight figures when you were 25, and by 29, you had lost it all.
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to tell us, what was it like losing it all? And here's why. Let me give you the context to the question. I think the biggest fear that everybody has is that they're going to lose it all. I meet people all the time that say, "Oh, my dream is to do this, but what if I lose it all?" You lost it all and you did even better on the other side. What was it like losing it, and what did you gain building it back?
Well, there was a really helpful moment because I was speaking in 2008 at a mortgage event. And at the day I spoke, mortgages were doing fine. But the second day, people are getting their loans rescinded because there's a 3-day clause where the banks cannot fund. And Countrywide and IndyMac went under. So I'm in the middle of watching these people lose their livelihood essentially. And thankfully, I had spoke the day before, but I also got to introduce other speakers like Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach, and this guy Roberto Monaco who helped me with speaking, and another person. And they all got standing ovations from the introduction because of how I could show up for them because how they showed up for me. And I sat down with Dan Sullivan at the time. I was 28, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm really struggling. I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but like, I'm losing so much money. I'm overextended on real estate. I'm not paying attention to my business." And he goes, "Interesting. How old are you?" I go, "I'm 28." He goes, "Fascinating. You're just like a decade early. We all go through this." He's like, "I got divorced and bankrupt in the same week." And this guy's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and all that. And I was like, so it was really helpful that he said that. It didn't mean that when I went home, I was still okay. The good news is, look, part of the reason I went from 8 million to zero was I did have $500,000 committed to taking my book, Killing Sacred Cows, and getting it out there, which it became a New York Times bestseller. So I wrote a check one day for my PR firm for 92,000, which left me with $1,000 in my bank, July 3rd of 2008. So it's like I still decided I'm going to gamble on myself and go all in. And the thing is, the pain that I had created for myself was stuff that the book, it's like you sometimes write the book that you need to read, you know? It's like I was like, wow, this is like the timing and this is really helpful. But I gained weight during that year. I just gained a lot of weight. I learned to receive though. I had people that go, "Hey, I want to go on book tour with you." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm struggling financially. I don't think I could." And like, "No, we'll pay just to be able to be with you. I'll pay for your flights. I'll pay for the hotel just because I want to be a fly on the wall when you're on the radio and on TV." I was like, so I just was like, okay, I'll receive that gift because I have to be resourceful. And before that, I wasn't that good at receiving because I was good at doing. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to get this done. And that was a gift. And also, it was really hard on my marriage during that time, 2008, 2009, really hard. But in 2010, we had the biggest year ever. We're making tons of money, but we still had this remnant of difficulty. And my wife had just become kind of numb in the marriage because she didn't feel like I was a leader. And we had two young kids. And I was so caught up in just surviving in the business that I wasn't emotionally available. And so we were not in a great place. We were maybe a 4 or 3 out of 10. And the money started coming in and no happiness came with it because I'm like, I hit New York Times and Inc. 500 in the same week. My wife didn't even know. Someone told her and she's like, "What? We didn't celebrate it?" I'm like, "No, I got real estate stuff that I'm still figuring out and the business." And she's like, so when it got really good financially that year, I was like, "What good does this? I'm not even excited about it because my wife and I aren't good." And I just decided, you know what? I've made a mistake by just digging this hole. She never threw it in my face because, Rudy, I worked my ass off to lose that money. I bought a bunch of real estate that went completely sideways, being over leveraged. What I learned more than anything is real estate isn't my jam. So why was I investing there? Because every financial person said to. My real estate are the 10 books that I wrote. I love to write. They make an impact. I build relationships. I love to speak. I invest in coaches. Too many people in the world right now invest in things they know nothing about because of the fear of investing fully in themselves and knowing what their purpose is because they're afraid, what if I don't get there? You will make mistakes. There will be things along the way, but it will be the teacher because now, me as a financial coach, after going through that, I've helped people navigate the most complicated real estate woes, the biggest issues that happen in the economy and in their business because I'd been through it and got to the other side without bankruptcy. And by 2011, I decided my marriage would be my biggest investment. And my wife got to the point where she's like, "Hey, you're not working a lot. Are we going to be okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're just improving margins and the team knows I'm not going to be there as much. I want to show you." something, I made a mistake when we were dating. And you said, if I was sick, would you quit what you're doing to take care of me? And I hesitated. And I could tell that you were concerned. I'm here to show you you're a priority. I'm here for you. We're going to connect. That was such an amazing year. And here we just celebrate our 24-year anniversary. And by the way, I called my 3 friends that had the best marriages. And I decided for 6 months, I wouldn't talk to anyone going through divorce because I didn't want to have that negativity. And I would only talk to my friends that had amazing marriages and fully invested in it so I could build that premier romantic, extraordinary marriage and have that pay off. So I had a partner that I could live my life with, do this life with, and has been there for me every step of the way. So thankfully, we made it through. It was like we started meeting every week. We created this vision, but it was up and down, man. We definitely fought during those times. There was definitely some emotions. And now, I mean, we just get along so extraordinarily well because I think part of it's we had the fights back then, so we know who each other is and how to support each other and what we're looking for. The only time she fights with me now is if I interrupt her, if I don't listen. I still have to work on that, Rudy. You're not surprised at all, right? You're like, oh yeah,
No,
yeah.
no. That was a masterclass in and of itself. We hear that so often, but I want everybody to go back and re-listen to exactly what that is, because that really is the framework for how you choose to live your life. And if anybody reads any of your books or follows you online or has the privilege of spending a few minutes with you is going to learn that. For the benefit of the audience, let's rewind just for a moment. When you make a mistake, go back and own the mistake. And then how you show up with consistency is going to show people who you really are. And he did that beautifully in his marriage. He also didn't focus on what he didn't want. He focused on what he did want. And his point of focus were the 3 people that had the 3 strongest relationships, because what did he want? He wanted a better quality relationship. And if you want a better business, you need to hang out with people that are in better business. You need to hang out with people that make better business decisions, etc. He's also very quick to be able to admit when he's done something wrong or made a mistake and finds humor in it. You'll notice there's humor, laughing, and, oh, well, I did this, and then pokes fun and then gets back to what was the point. And then at every single turn, Garrett is mentioning, here's what I gained, or here was the lesson. I want to speak into a spiritual truth that very few people know and or understand. Everything that happens in your life is always a lesson, and it is coming to you for you so you can reach another level of ascension. Garrett said that he ended up losing all this money. And in losing all the money, he was put in a position where he had to receive. And I want you to hear that sometimes the greatest gifts come in a time when we feel like we don't have other options and we're forced to learn the lesson. There's 2 ways to learn. You can either learn the lesson in pain or you can just choose to learn the lesson. And so the question you should be asking yourself today is, where in your life are you resisting the lesson, in which case you're going to be forced to learn it? Or where could you just learn it? And Garrett is one of the most generous people I know in time, money, energy, knowledge, etc. But it's because he first learned to be somebody who could receive it. And so now he knows what is the equal exchange of giving and or in receiving. I want to ask you a question as it relates to what you do today. You help people save more money of what it is that they make. And everybody else in the world out there in the financial market is telling you, make more money, make more money. I mentioned earlier, you're not a tax guy, although you touch taxes, but you're more of like a wealth philosopher. And I really want to speak into what are the main like money leaks that people have at every level. Because if we were to look at the average person listening to this who has a $2,000 savings account, or somebody that is maybe at $1 million savings account, and somebody that is a high net worth individual, like I would imagine we make very similar mistakes. Could you give us one really big leak where we lose
Mhm.
money, and what could be one thing that we could all benefit from shifting today?
I'm going to use the 4 I's or the 4 places people leak the most. And I know some people are watching this all over the world. So the first I is IRS, just say tax, but that's the biggest leak because a lot of people are afraid. They don't know what they could do. They have historians telling them what they have to pay, not strategists showing them what to do. And part of it's because if you don't have an attorney that communicates with your CPA, you're for sure going to overpay tax because they have to be on the same page and working together. What happens a lot of times, one person goes, "Oh, I talked to my CPA. I'm going to tell the attorney." The attorney's like, "You can't do that." And like, and then they can't explain it because it's not their area of expertise. The second I is interest. People can either restructure loans to get a better situation with refinancing. They can renegotiate better interest rates, or they could just reallocate funds. I see people, someone that was at the Montana Mastermind that I was working with, they were earning 2.2% in an account and paying 22% on a credit card. That's obviously, let's just pay off the credit card, but nobody looks at the big picture a lot of times. So it's a lack of coordination. The third I is investments, and small fees create big long term compounded costs. So if you earn 10% over 30 years on 10 grand, it's a $174,000. If you earn 9.2%, it's $140,000. That's a pretty big difference. That's a big difference from less than 1%. So if you can remove any hidden fees, like I'm like a financial detective looking and saying, hey, look what you're paying, look what the market's doing, you're losing 20% of your growth for no reason. You're just paying legal fees, admin fees, expense ratios. And then the final one is insurance. The biggest mistake they make there is they don't insure the catastrophic things, they insure inconsequential things, which is high premium dollars. So just with coordination, they can get better coverage if they just take care of the small things themselves. Because if you make too many insurance claims, they just raise your premiums anyway. So those four I's right there, for a lot of people, that's 10 to 20% more bottom line dollars for them just by handling those properly. You can't just double your return on a retirement plan without taking some inordinate risk. So, how nice that you could double what you get a lot easier just by saving money and plugging the leaks. I like to start there because I think a lot of people don't want to meet with financial people because they're like, I'm going to meet with them. They're going to make me feel guilty for not saving enough money. And I'm going to have to lower my quality of life. What is wealth without quality of life? It doesn't really exist. So I'm like, well, hey, if we find money, maybe you want to improve a little quality of life right now and maybe create a little cash flow or some savings or invest back into your business or into your own education, where most people are like, no, put it right here in this plan and lock it away till 59 and a half. It's like, was that really the best move? So I think that's why a lot of people are hesitant and gun shy to meet with financial people.
Yeah, my hesitation has always been them driving their own interests. When I came into money, I was 25 years old. I had three financial advisors sent by my bank to come and sit in my living room. In South Africa, the banking system is very different. When you have a high net worth, you don't go into a bank ever. They come to you. You want cash, they bring it to you. You want to sign a deal in your house, they do it on your behalf and they bring it to you and they notarize. Like it's just a very different way of banking. And I had these three bankers sitting in my house giving me all kinds of advice on things that I should do. And after, I want to say, 2 hour meeting, I had one question. And I was going to decide whether I was moving forward with them based on the answer to the one question because all of it was way over my head. And at the end of their presentation, I said, okay, thank you so much. Could each of you just tell me how much money do you have in each of these areas? And they all went very quiet. And then they fumbled a little bit, and then they said, "Well, nothing. We're planning on it." And they were in their 50s, and there I was, 25 years old, and I sat back and I was like, "Okay." So they're recommending something that they haven't tried and tested, that they don't do themselves, and they don't have the resources to do. So I'm taking financial advice from somebody who clearly doesn't have the money, or if they have it, they're not putting it in the way they believe it, and they're doing it because they're bettering their own pocket. And I said, "Well, I think we're done here, gentlemen. Thank you so much." And that's it. I ended it, but it also prevented me from working with any other financial advisors. And it's because you're always like, well, who's the expert and where do you place the money? So rather than asking you a question of like, well, where would you put your money? And we may very well get to that. I would love to know from you, what is one piece of mainstream money advice that sounds responsible that we hear online all the time, but it's the wrong place to put the money?
This is the one that's the most common and it's everywhere. It sounds so good. Like, hey, you know what? If you just save $100 a month from the time you're young, you'll be a millionaire. Okay, let's look at that. For that to be true, the market has to do what it did the last 40 years, which includes the 90s, which was the biggest 10-year pump ever. So, like, if we remove the 90s and we look at a 30-year, it doesn't get you nearly as far. We're not taking into consideration other factors with that either, like what would happen if it's in a taxable account instead of a Roth IRA? What happens with inflation? 40 years from today, $1 million is going to be like 200 grand. So, as cool as it sounds, like I'll be a millionaire, it won't spend like a million, and what they're never considering is opportunity cost. See, I think the biggest problem is kids thinking I should just spend as little as possible and put it away instead of I should put everything into my own life and dream to grow myself. I think of it like a detour. If we say, let's take money and put it right to savings, that's the straight line. The detour would be like, let's take money, put it into myself, grow myself, then put it to savings and investments. And if you don't put it to yourself first, you'll end up with money you'll never spend because, okay, let's say you have that $1 million. You never learn to create cash flow with it. So it's in an account And people don't like go 40 years of their life being miserly and never spending money. And then when it's 40 years in one day, go, finally, I'm going to start spending. These people have short arms and deep pockets. They have alligator arms. It's trained as a form of scarcity that there's not enough money to go around. And if you just start early enough, now the problem is, what if you're 50? Now that advice just makes you feel really bad. Oh, I should have started earlier. I should have done it. And what they're never talking about is risk isn't in the investment, it's in the investor. So you've got to become a better investor. And I know too many people are like, oh, I just trust my guy and I hand him money. I'm like, cool. Well, tell me about the investment. Like I was at an event speaking on Saturday. This guy's like, yeah. And I know the people that he's speaking to, interestingly enough. And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to put my money in oil and gas. It's going to be really tax efficient. I'm like, so you're putting your money into drilling then if it's tax efficient? He's like, no, into oil and gas. I'm like, if you buy oil, they don't go, here's a tax deduction. If you buy gas, you're paying to drill, which you don't know if that is actually going to provide oil and gas. So, is this really the best thing for you to do with your money? You can pay me today, it's tax deductible. And if I do nothing for it, yeah, you just lost money. So, it's like, but they needed permission. And I finally walked them through for an hour in front of a group. And at the end, they're like, I've always wanted to do real estate. I'm like, don't rush into it, learn about it and do that. You can get the tax advantages you're looking for, but it's going to be more active. The false thing is you could be totally passive with your money and be okay. No, you got to be actively responsible. It doesn't mean you have to trade every day. And Rudy, I'm also just kind of like, I believe in what's behind everything. I have $0 in the stock market because I would guess 40% of the S&P 500 are companies if they went out of business tomorrow, my kids would be better off. I have no interest in sugar water doing better in the future. I have no interest in people being more addicted to screen time because of an algorithm that suffocates them and gets them think that that's what the world is. So why would I put money in that? And yet most people go, "Well, I just put it there because that's where you invest." I'm like, "No, that's where people speculate." So I know there's a lot of lot to unpack there, but I'd say the final piece is I also feel that the stock market used to be a really noble thing, which was amazing for people where big companies or big ideas could get funding. There's not a single company I know today that doesn't get all their funding from private capital and then exit and take money off the table through the public stock market. So there's only 4,000 publicly traded companies, but think about the millions of small businesses that are actually doing great things that are never funded and, including an individual putting enough into themselves.
Knowing everything that you know today, what would your advice be to our audience, knowing that there's different measures of wealth listening to this, but what would be your advice of where would you put your money or where would you split your money or what would you recommend people start to learn about to educate themselves on where to put their money?
The biggest three areas that are wealth engines that grow wealth are real estate, which, as people have heard, I don't love real estate because I'm usually talking to like an attorney, a banker, a property manager, maintenance. Like nobody ever hugged me when I owned real estate. Nobody ever wrote me a card to thank me. But with my books, that happens a lot with my speeches. So, like, real estate's not for me, but for the right person, that could be a big wealth engine because there's a lot of tax efficiency, there's leverage where you could get growth, there's potential cash flow, but it's also not very passive. I think a lot of people lose money because they get into syndications they don't know enough about and they're not liquid. The second thing is, 91% of people worth 5 million or more in the second category, you own a business. And that's not for everyone, but even if you don't own a business, if you could work for a business where you get upside potential, where you can, if you contribute to the bottom line, you can get compensated. So it's more than just time for money. But business is another big wealth engine. And then the third area is intellectual property, which is it's evolving heavily in today's world because now we have AI intellectual property, meaning the systems and processes that are built there. You still have books, but more information is becoming more abundant and more free. But those are the three biggest wealth generators out there. If someone's like, I just don't want to think about it, fine, they could do the normal thing, but I would do an index fund, not a managed fund, because index funds beat managed funds 80 some percent of the time over 10 years, 90% of the time over 20 years, and 99% of the time over 30 years. So you just get to the place where you reduce your fees and reduce your drag. But if people really want to build wealth, I think wealth comes from purpose and purpose comes from us developing ourselves and be able to contribute in a way that's meaningful. And to me, that's the real way to unlock wealth. But wealth is really about our ability to be present and to enjoy life. So it's not just about the dollars that we have. You could have a big net worth, but if it doesn't create any cash flow and it doesn't create any meaning, or if it was, you're concerned whether it's going to last or not, that's not going to translate to a happier life. But if you can make purpose profitable, or you get paid for creating value, and you get to be engaged in that work. I find that to be really, really rewarding instead of just something that's like a company I don't know anything about because my friend told me it's where I should put my money.
You know, when I met you and you spoke at that mastermind, you really spoke into how can we create legacy wealth. And you blew my mind by just mentioning, well, here's some tax strategies that you could implement right now, not changing
Yeah.
a whole lot of what you're doing, and you could save X amount of money. And you were speaking to business leaders, and I appreciate not everybody that's listening to this is, but every single person listening to this is, or at least should be, paying taxes. And so we can reduce our taxes. So, what I would like you to speak about, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
is just give us what is some low hanging fruit that we could leverage. I know you spoke beautifully, and your book does too, into like what would the Rockefellers do and how did they manage wealth? How could we learn from how they manage wealth? And I know those are two different questions, but I want to try and give our audience a little bit more context as to what it is that you do, what is the company that you've created, and
Yeah.
how do you help not only educate, but also manage people through the process of being able to build substantial wealth for themselves and their families.
So the first thing is if people DM me on Instagram, Garrett B. Gunderson, and put tax navigator and Rudi, we'll hook you up with a checklist for every single down the fairway tax strategy. There are more tax strategies that are in that navigator, but those are custom. This is like a list that I've never had anyone go through it and not be like, oh my God, I didn't know about this, this, and this. So that'll really help them out. And there's a little bit of writing there as well. The lowest hanging fruit ones are really for business owners, have probably the most, or real estate investors is where you get a ton of tax advantages. If you're not a real estate investor or a business owner, people can put money in a health savings account, and that's going to be something that's pre tax and it doesn't have to necessarily be used for health or flexible spending accounts did. You got to be careful. A lot of people defer taxes, not save taxes. So a lot of people would think they're saving tax, putting money in a retirement plan, but the reality is you have to pay the tax on the other end. What if taxes are higher in the future? So I'm looking more at like the tax savings. If you're getting a refund at the end of the year as an employee, you should change your exemptions and stop giving the government an interest-free loan. If you're a business owner, the simple things is like the Augusta rule where you could rent out your home to your business 14 days a year, write that off if you're hosting retreats or, whether it's for employees or clients, and then that's a tax deduction that you don't have to claim the personal income. Or there's a thing called section 199A, which is a 20% qualified business deduction off the top. So then that would lower your taxes that you're only paying tax on 80% of your income for part of your income. So that's one really to look at. We had a client last year that was buying his dream home in October. And I said, well, and maybe this is something that we talked to you about too, Rudi. I said, are you willing to move in a few months after, like in January? They're like, why? I'm like, because we could actually turn it into an Airbnb for a time period and do a short term rental and then get a cost segregation, which allows us to depreciate, which all that really meant was we got him a couple $100,000 of tax deductions because he delayed moving into his house because of the new big, beautiful bill. And again, it's just like, it's straightforward. It's in the code. Some people, like, I'll put out videos sometimes like, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, here's the code. It's called 132J, where you can actually write off any maintenance for a gym or stuff like that if you offer it to your employees. Well, I have a company that's just my family, so I offer it to them. So that's completely a write off. But people get scared of some of these things, right? Because they have historians or it just sounds too good to be true. But when it's a tax code, there are people that might abuse those by taking too much. And I think the biggest abuse is people say they're doing something, they're not doing it. Like pay your kids, you can pay your kids, but if they don't do anything and you pay them, that's fraud. If they do something, like if they're in your social media, or I used to take my kids, they'd hand out books at events. One time, my youngest was signing books, but Believe in Yourself in the Rockefeller book. I just thought, I was like, dude, whoever got that copy, that was awesome because he was like 7 years old and it felt really cool to have that moment. But if you're actually doing what we're talking about, instead of just saying you're doing it, then it's not fraud. It's just a part of the tax code. I mean, I see accounts say you can't write off home office. You've been able to write off home office since the 90s. You absolutely can, even if you have a different office. This is my home office right here. So there's just so many opportunities to save on tax. And for those people like, well, why are you saving on tax? We need the tax money. Guess what? You're paying excise taxes when you buy gas. You're paying sales taxes. You're paying property taxes. We're paying state taxes. We pay plenty of tax. And a lot of times, if you're saving, you're putting it back into the economy anyway. Actually, when was this? Like in the 80s, they lowered taxes and actually increased tax revenue after a few years because money started to flow through the economy faster. So, I mean, I kind of look at it like I want to pay my fair share, but I don't want to pay a dollar more.
I think that is the most beautiful way to look at at creating wealth. And I'm hammering this intentionally today. Everybody wants more money. And so the pressure that we have to make more money seems to be making more money is the lowest hanging fruit, but keeping more money is actually where the money's at because you're already generating income. And if you can keep more, you can use more to pour back into yourself. And if you invest in yourself, using your words here, Garrett, then you can make more money in the future. And so you're leveraging your passions, your purpose, and what you came here and what you're meant to be. And so there is a strategy in paying less money in taxes, but we don't all know. And I started the episode today saying, when you know better, you can do better. And my wife and I had booked a really fancy vacation, and I don't remember what we paid for it, but call it $25,000 for 5 or 6 days. And you were speaking to me saying, well, that could have been a write off. Like the whole trip, if you plan it correctly, and you've got to have the meeting notes. And I sat there thinking, like, if you don't know, how are you supposed to manage these things? And Garrett was sharing with me, just confidentially, trust you won't mind, but you were talking about you have family meetings and you had your family meeting in this part of the world. And then your next family meeting is going to be over there. And we don't know these things. You touched on something a moment ago, and I want to come back to it as we bring today's episode into a close. I would love for you to do a brief introduction to your business, what you do, and how you can
Yeah.
help people. But I really want to key in on something. If you're not a tax advisor, if you're not a strategist in money, finances, investments, etc., there's no way you could ever keep up on this yourself. But to hire people that already know and understand what it is that they're doing and that they open up all the fees associated, show you where you can save money. Garrett had said to this group of gentlemen when he was presenting, he's like, I will save you this amount guaranteed based on this, if we just make these changes. And it's like, to me, makes a no brainer. But earlier in the episode today, you said something that I want to really touch on. And that is that so often we have an accountant, but the accountant doesn't speak to the lawyer, and the lawyer doesn't speak to and so there's all of this misinformation or lack of transparency. And so if you don't have the left hand talking to the right hand, that is, I think, the biggest mistake that people make because there's so much misinformation. Whereas you've kind of put everything under one umbrella, you've put it in a way that's easy and
Yeah.
attainable for anybody and everybody. And so if you could just do a brief, shameless self plug here, I would love for you to
Yeah.
benefit our audience.
And I want to be really clear on this because sometimes people think when I talk about what I talk about that you got to be really wealthy to work with us. That's not true at all. You don't need a trust fund. You don't need to have millions of dollars. Our job is to help people get there. The ones that have already got there, we actually refer out the people that are worth ultra high net worth. There's too much moving pieces. We actually have a partner that we work with. What we're focused on is I think that everybody deserves to have a comprehensive team. And in the past, I couldn't really provide that. But thanks to technology, we could do that now. They get assigned a results facilitator that's their one on one person that they meet with. Their job is just to upload documents to our results facilitator. And then we analyze everything. And then we coordinate with the attorneys and the accountants. There's 10 main areas where finances can be coordinated that we focus on. And we go, all right, let's get you financially fit. Let's make sure your financial house is in order. All right, is there a way to create more cash flow with your existing assets? That's financial independence. And then what I focus on, I teach kind of in a group for everybody, is the financial freedom, the mindset aspect, because you can have a lot of money and still be tortured. And there's like, let's make sure that freedom is there. So, yeah, the way we work is if we can't pay for ourselves, then we don't work with people. We want to get money back from the government and institutions. And so we usually do a discovery session to find out where someone's at. And we can't sell anything on that call because sometimes people are discovery and they think sales call. No, it's like we just ask questions, get to know the person. Then we do a report of findings as a separate call. And here's everything someone can do. And they can either hire us from that report of findings or take it to their existing team. About two-thirds of the people hire us, a third of the people take it and use their existing team. We kind of look at that as like a pay it forward, build the brand and reputation. And the easiest way to get to know someone and have them get to know us is through that process. So I have a team that's in the DMs of Instagram, then you can communicate back and forth with to learn more about these programs. Rudy's going to have like the links and everything. But just so people know, like the program starts at like $6,500 down and $500 a month. So our old programs are like 12,500 down to $2,000 a month. We've been able to make it so much more efficient. It's been such an amazing few years. And when I sold the old company, it's because I felt like we got out of touch and could only work with pretty high net worth people. Now we can really help. We can help a business that's just doing 350,000 of revenue. of revenue. They're not even taking home a lot at that point. But man, it's so nice to be able to restructure their loans and help them save on tax and find that breathing room and improve their life. And then they end up growing their business.
I love that you mentioned the dollar value because I'm sure everybody listening to this was thinking like, "Oh, I couldn't do that." And what I love about it is if you were to pay that amount of money towards this, you would save more than that in taxes guaranteed. I mean, it's
Yep.
mind-blowing the wealth of knowledge. In full transparency with my audience, we are not working together yet because 2 months before I met Garrett,
Right.
I literally paid upfront almost double and then some for the same service with another company who was restructuring some of my properties investments and accounting and every I mean, and when I met him, I was like, "Oh my God, like what?" And so I was going to have them on my podcast because I thought, wow, the world needs to know this. And when I met you, I canceled theirs and I came after you and I was like, I need you on the show. And so I highly recommend if you are somebody who is taking yourself seriously, you want to step into a new level of wealth, you want to keep more money that you have, you need to align with people that have already done it, people that understand what it is that they're doing. But more than anything, you need to align with people who have your best interest at heart and not just their best interest at heart. Garrett, you are a 10 times author. You are a New York Times bestselling author. You're a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. I only mention that because that is where other people are validating the validity of your message and your work. That only happens when people resonate with what it is that you're saying, what you're teaching, and the work that you're doing in the world. I love you as a brother, man. And I love how you can so easily and vulnerably share some of your pains, your struggles, your traumas. And in a 40 to 50-minute episode, it's really hard to get into like who's the man and what got him here and what was the journey. But I would love to ask you one closing question, and that
Yeah.
is just aimed at somebody who is the old version of who you once were. And I want you to pick the timeline of where that lands for you. But if there is somebody that is aspiring to get to a place that they will have a beautiful, loving relationship with their spouse, they have a high level of income, they have safety. And you used a word earlier where you said so many people make money, but they still live in lack. So I'm going to use they have the safety in their financial situation. They are creating legacy, and that is just that they're protecting their kids, protecting their family, protecting the money that they make and how to use it. But that's where they are wanting to go. But they feel like that is elusive. It is so far away. What would be your advice to them in the closing moments of today's episode?
Yeah. Progress over perfection. Done is better than perfect. I don't really think that we're ever truly balanced, but we can have depth and harmony. Depth means that we're present, harmony means we're intentional. And so the biggest thing is not to compare ourselves to anyone else other than maybe where we came from and look at that progress from moment to moment. And so, look, it's something I have to work on myself at times because when I saw you, I was kind of like, man, I've got pretty much all the things and I still feel like I'm frustrated because I was frustrated about what was going on with media. And you're like, well, let's go back through like when was the magical so you just get in those conversations when you meet with someone and that feeling of this is someone that's expansive using your language, Rudy, have the conversation, approach them, be bold enough to ask. You and I both know, and I hope the listeners know this, when you get a chance to create value for someone, it is actually a benefit to the value creator as well as the person receiving it. When someone helps me, I remember I really, really hurt my back in 2022. And there was this woman that's really good with energy. And I had gifted her something. So I called her, I'm like, I can't get out of bed. Like my back is seized up. She's like, I'll be there. I'm coming today. And she was like doing all this work with me. And I kept saying, thank you so much for doing this. She's like, thank you for allowing me to be in your presence right now. I've always wanted to give back to what you gave. That whole world is like the receiver actually gets a gift and so does the creator of the gift get the gift. Think about it when you give someone a like when I can barely hold a surprise when I got a gift for my wife. I'm so excited to give it to her. I get the benefit of like, oh, I'm going to give this gift to her. So allow people to give you the gift of support. Allow yourself to have the gift of receiving and course correct or otherwise you'll be forced into correction because you don't take any level of action. Responsibility is the gateway to everything here. And when you take that responsibility, you can heal and you can move forward. And when you don't take responsibility, you become a victim, and victimhood is not a place that serves anyone well.
Gosh, we could have started the whole podcast from that very rebuttal right there. I want to just share in closing a story with everybody of how my wife came to me one day and said, "You're not giving people the gift of helping you." And so I support and coach some of the highest net worth individuals. I'm working with people who have tremendous levels of responsibility, success, etc., but they come to me for answers. And so I believed that, well, if they come to me for answers and that they're paying me to have the answers, then I should always know the answer to everything. And I can never look like I don't know. So I cannot be vulnerable and weak and not know and question myself. And so I always have to be stoic in, oh, yes, this is what to do, and be confident in my delivery of what it is that I'm saying or doing because I'm the one that's being paid. And she said, when was the last time you phoned one of your friends or you phoned a client that is really proficient in an area, or you phoned your parents for that matter and asked for help? And I literally couldn't answer the question. I could not because I couldn't remember when I'd ever asked for help. And she's like, you will break your back to not ask for help. And I think it's because you don't want to look weak. And I was like, wow, talk about a mirror reflected back to you through your spouse. And since then, I have leaned into a little more asking for help and being able to say, hey, you're really good at something and I'd love your eyeballs on this. And the gift is in the giving. My parents would always say it's greater to give than it is to receive. And I thought my parents were crazy, but it is. It is always an incredible gift to be able to not only give something to somebody, but the gift in giving someone the opportunity to give to you. And so that's my challenge for you at the end of today's episode. I have many challenges. One, I want you to go and send him the text message. Remind us the text message, the DM
Yeah.
that you want.
Garrett B. Gunderson, tax navigator. Let me know it came from Rudi. So I know you're one of Rudi's people. That'd be awesome.
And we're going to link that into the show notes for you today, as well as every single one of this man's incredible books. I am going to highly recommend you follow him online so that you can learn a little bit more about how he shows up out and in the world, not only as somebody who's going to save money, help you make more money, at least give you some of the guidance to be able to do, but also just how to be a good freaking human being. Brother, I have so much love for you and for what you're
Love
doing
you,
out and in
man.
the world and how
Appreciate
you
you.
show up.
Really enjoyed this conversation. It was a pleasure. Love how you bring out the best in people, including myself.
Well, you're an incredible human being. To the audience, man, thank you for investing your time, effort, energy, and money here. Go out there today and give somebody the gift of giving you something and want nothing in return. I love you so much. We'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast. Bye. If this episode gave you clarity, peace, or a perspective shift, hold on to that. And here is how you lock it in. Subscribe so that you keep building momentum week after week. And if you're the kind of person that believes a good message should travel, please leave a review. Reviews aren't just ratings. They're signals that help this reach the people who are ready for it. And then share this episode with somebody you love, someone you lead, or somebody that you were rooting for. Links are in the show notes so that you can connect with me online and on Instagram. Now go out there and take one beautiful, bold, and aligned step and make it count. I'm going to catch you on the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast.